Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Guns Explained. I'm your host Cameron Porter. We're going to be very lucky today. We're going to be joined by Sheriff Wimmer of Tooele County, Utah. He's going to talk us through some of the safety rules and expectations that you'll find at any gun range. For those of you who may be considering purchasing a firearm or wanting to get more practice in and you're just not very familiar with gun ranges, he's going to talk you through all the expectations that you need to know in order to go there and have a good experience. And he's also going to brief us a little bit on how you can keep your firearms safe in the home. That's always a concern for new firearm owners, is how to protect the firearms from their children or from theft. And he's going to give us some tips on that as well. So thank you so much for being here, Sheriff.
Thanks for having me.
So the first question I have for you is, what are the basic safety rules anytime you're on a range or just anytime you're firing for recreation?
Well, you naturally need to read the rules and regulations of any range you enter. However, every range is going to have some fundamental rules. One of them is to treat your weapon or your gun as though it's always loaded. This keeps you cognizant of where you're pointing it. You never want to be pointing it anywhere but downrange at a range. If you start getting sloppy with it, people are going to get upset at you and you're going to be embarrassed, or worse, have an accident. And another rule is to always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. And that is right down to the very last minute. That means you've pointed downrange, you've lined up your sights with your target, and it is that point in time in which your finger would enter the trigger guard and start to squeeze the trigger. And the final rule is to be sure of your target and then anything beyond it. And while the range, that's usually taken care of, if you go out recreational shooting in the desert, that's very important that you're not shooting in the direction of someone else.
Absolutely, so that's great. So, always treat every firearm as if it's loaded. So, keeping it pointed at somewhere it's not going to hurt and keeping your finger off the trigger till you're ready to shoot, and that's the very last step that you do. And then, being aware of where your target is, what's around it, and what's behind it. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And if you follow them simple rules, you eliminate the possibility of any accident.
Yeah, I can see that. If the gun's always pointed in a safe direction, then it's never even if it does go off, it's not going to hurt anybody. Yeah, that's great. So what would you recommend people be prepared with when they go to a range to shoot? What should they bring with them?
You have to have eye protection and ear protection. That is fundamental of any session on the range. You want to protect both them because you never know what's going to happen as far as any bounce back or any brass flying from other shooters.
Okay, yeah. So the eye protection protects you from the brass, and then the ear protection just from the sound of the firearms, right?
Yeah, they're well beyond the healthy noise levels we're supposed to be able to be exposed to.
Great. So other than on the range, for a first-time firearm owner, what are some tips that you have? Things that they can do to keep it safe if they have from their children, if they have children, or from theft?
It's imperative that you protect your family from your own firearms. And the most effective way of doing that is to always keep them secured. Always keep them locked up. You can do that with child locks. You can get these at just about any law enforcement agency. They hand them out for free. And they can prevent a firearm from being discharged, but they do nothing for theft protection. You need a safe to protect them from theft, and then you also need to set up your safe in a way that keeps it from being the whole thing hauled out.
Yeah,
so you need,
safe itself.
you need to have it bolted to a wall or to the floor. Secure the firearm is fundamental, but then to also store your ammo in a separate area, secure from that. And then another mistake people will make is they have the keys to both of them stored where they keep all their car keys. Well, you have to store them keys in a place that is secure from just one of your kids going and grabbing the key and unlocking safes or lock boxes.
Sure. So kind of just make sure I understood. So there are types of locks that you can get that can prevent the firearm from being fired unless you unlock the lock.
Correct.
And then of course gun safes. You get a gun safe and then you actually bolt the safe to the wall or the floor to make sure it doesn't move.
Absolutely.
Wow. And then keeping firearms and ammunition stored in separate places. That sounds like a really smart way to do it.
Correct.
And then also even storing the keys to the gun safe and to the locks in different places than your car keys or your other keys.
Yes.
So my last question would be, what role, particularly in protecting the firearms from the children, or protecting the children from harming themselves. What role does education play in that?
It's imperative. We hand out flyers that are in our lobby at the sheriff's office, giving parents the fundamental discussion you have to have with your kids. And that also gives a short portion for the kids to read on what they should do. One of the things that we don't want to kid ourselves is that you can actually hide a weapon from a kid. They're curious, they're natural, they know where you keep everything. You have to teach them that they're deadly. There's no room for error when you make a mistake with a firearm. The damage it creates is irreversible.
And you said you actually have pamphlets that you give out at the sheriff's office.
Yeah, we hand them out. We have them in bookmark form, we have them in a pamphlet form, and then we also, of course, provide gun locks free of charge.
Wow, do you, is there anything online? Do you have anything online that's available?
We don't specifically have anything online, but there is lots of gun safety information on specifically what we're talking about here today. It's all over the internet. You just have to start looking for it and seek out the information, and there's a plethora of information for parents and how to have that conversation with your children on when the gun is brought into the home, and how they should behave when they run into a gun. For example, if your kids are at a neighbor's house and they run into a gun, the importance of leaving it there and going and alerting an adult is one of the most important things they can do. And that's all the more reason you need to secure your guns, so that when you have kids from the neighborhood at your house, they don't happen across your gun. We all get pretty set in our home protection, and we'll sometimes put our gun on our nightstand. Well, that's dangerous, because you open yourself up to forget about it.
That's a good thought. It's not just your kids, it's your kids' friends that you got to be concerned about. And they may not be taught the way that you've taught your children.
That's correct.
Well, I'll tell you what, keep an eye out on our page, because we're going to find some of that online information, those safety guides for parents on how to protect their kids from guns and how to teach their children about guns. And we're going to get them on our Facebook page for you guys. So, Sheriff, I think that's all the questions I have. So I really am very grateful that you were here. You've given us some great information. And I want to thank you all for watching this episode, and we'll see you next week. I did want to give a special shout out to our sponsors on Patreon for helping make Guns Explained continue to be possible. And if you want to support us on Patreon, it's just patreon.com/gunsexplained. So we'll catch you next week.